Hi, I want to talk about starter. Generally, when you're not using starter, you keep it in the refrigerator, which I have right here. The starter, in your case, can either have come from a purchased starter that you got and put together and followed the instructions and then put it in the refrigerator. Or it could be the discard or what's left over from the last time you made bread. That's what this is for me. The last time I made bread, this was leftover starter. I put it in this jar and I kept it in the refrigerator. When the starter is in the refrigerator, well, the starter is alive. It's full of yeast. When it's at room temperature, it needs to eat. And what it eats is flour. It uses water to mix it. Obviously, you don't want to sit there feeding starter every single day of the week forever, the rest of your life, just so you can always have it. So what you do is you put the starter in the refrigerator. When the starter is in the refrigerator, it slows down and it does not need to be fed every day or more than once a day, possibly even. Instead, it needs to be fed once a week. We'll discuss feeding when we start making starter for the bread, but just say it needs to be fed once a week. In my case, just to be clear, I never take the starter out of the refrigerator to feed it, just to keep it going, because I make bread at least once a week. And honestly, I think I've seen this stuff last for 2 weeks. I've never killed my starter. Never killed my starter. What's going on with the camera? I gotta turn this AI feature off. All right. I've never killed my starter. And I doubt you will kill your starter either. I have ignored it and it slowed down and it took more feeding to get it ready to make bread. But it did work. So generally, maintaining your starter is not as hard as you think. Feeding it, just to maintain it, let's just say that you're not making bread. Well, maybe I should explain all feedings. In order to feed starter, what you do is you take a certain amount of this and you weigh it, let's say 10 grams, and you mix for what they call a 1-to-1-to-1. You mix 10 grams of water with the 10 grams of starter and mix it up so it's kind of liquid, and then add 10 grams of flour and let it sit for about 4-5 hours. When it's done, it should have risen. If I was doing this just to keep what's in the refrigerator alive, I would probably take 20 grams out of here, mix it with 20 grams of water, mix it with 20 grams of flour, stir it up, put it in a heat box, which I'll discuss later, for 4 hours, and then take the jar and put it in the refrigerator and throw away the old jar or empty out the old jar. So the new jar will have it. When you do this feeding of starter, it is advisable to keep it in a temperature controlled environment, preferably around 80 degrees is what I do. But I have a heat box, which I will show you now. So coming up, here's my proofing box. You can see that. It's a plastic box with a light bulb on a thermostat. And when I turn on the thermostat, you can see the numbers go up. And boom. I know the film makes it hard to see the numbers, but the light turns on because it's not 80 degrees. When it reaches 80 degrees, the light will turn off. So I can take starter and just put it in here for it to proof. And I do that between all the feedings. If you're going to get serious about this, I suggest that you eventually make yourself a proofing box. I think buying one is about $200. That was too cheap. There's another alternative you can use to a proofing box, and that is simply put the starter or whatever you're proofing in the oven, close the door, and turn on the light. Hopefully the light will heat up what's inside there. It might be hard to get it up to 80 degrees in the winter, but give it a try. Generally speaking, the way all the starter works is the cooler it is, the longer it takes the starter to rise. If you were to do what I called a 1-to-1-to-1, 10 grams starter, 10 grams flour, 10 grams water, and put it in a proofing box at 80 degrees, it would double in size in about 4 hours, maybe 5. It's flexible. It depends on how lively the starter is at the time. If you're first starting to make bread for the day, the first rise out of the refrigerator might be a little slow. Anyway, it's okay. You're going to do this 2 or 3 times every time you make a loaf of bread. So at 1-to-1-to-1 and about 80 degrees, it takes about 4 hours to double the starter, which is what you're trying to do. You can also do 1-to-2-to-2, which is like 10 grams of starter, 20 grams of water, 20 grams of flour. That will probably do more than double in size because it's got more food to eat. But it will take longer. And probably at 80 degree proofing box, that will probably take about 6 hours. And sometimes I do it actually almost every time I make bread. I do a 1-to-3-to-3. That's 20 or 25 grams of starter to 60 grams of water and 60 grams of flour. That really gets it going, but it takes a long time. In my case, it runs overnight. It takes so long that I frequently start it. I don't even run it in the proofing box. I let it run at room temperature, rise at room temperature, because I don't want to have to wake up early to get the starter. So I'll let it go slow. And then when I do wake up, I might put it in the proofing box for an hour just to finish it off. Now, this information is out of context, so it doesn't make sense to you yet, but you're going to see soon how I crank the starter to make bread, and these things should go. I just want you to understand that the more you feed the starter, the more flour and water you give for the starter, the longer it's going to take for it to reach its peak. So basically the whole process of making bread is you take some starter out, you feed it, you let it sit wherever you're going to let it sit, either in the proofing box, in room temperature, or in the oven, for a period of time, let's say 4 hours if it's 1-to-1-to-1. And then you turn around and take that, and you take a portion of that starter, you put it in another jar, and you feed it again, and then you let it sit for the appropriate amount of time. If it's 1-to-1-to-1, it'll be 4 hours. In the case of bread, I do 3 feedings. I do 1 feeding in the morning at 1-to-1-to-1. Then around, I think it's 2 o'clock. Yeah, 2 o'clock. I'm going to get another feeding, which will get me to 6 o'clock. Take till 6 o'clock. Actually, it's 4 feedings. Then I do another feeding starting 6 o'clock and let it run until 11 p.m. And lastly, I do a fourth feeding at 11 p.m. and I let it run overnight. And then the next morning, I'm going to start making the bread. And the morning after, once the bread's been made, it'll go into the refrigerator, and the morning after that, it will be baked. So you start your starter 2 days before you eat your bread. That looks like a lot of work, but in the end, you're going to find it's actually not a lot of work at all. It's just a lot of sitting and waiting for the alarm to tell you to go quickly do something. I hope that's a reasonable description of how starter works. I'll probably send you a video, point you to a video that explains it in more detail. So I think the next thing we're going to do is let's start working the starter to make some bread.